One of my very first thoughts when I spoke to my therapist for the very first time was, I said, am I a bad person having all these thoughts? Why am I having these thoughts? Am I being punished? You know, you're not a bad person. It's an anxiety disorder. It's anxiety on steroids. That's the best way for me to describe OCD at times.
Welcome to Happiful and Counselling Directories podcast. I have. Today we're joined by Shaun Flores, journalist, presenter, model, actor and TEDx speaker. Shaun kindly shares his personal experience of OCD, how he views it to date, and why talking about OCD helps him as well as others. Just a note, this is a really raw and honest conversation in which Shaun talks about intrusive thoughts and suicidal thoughts. So please be mindful if this could be triggering for you. We'd love you to check out more mental health conversations on Happiful after you've listened to this episode. You can download the free Happiful app, visit happiful.com, or follow the links in the show notes to find out more. I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Shaun Flores, journalist, presenter, model, actor, and TEDx speaker. Today, we're going to be talking about OCD and Shaun's very personal experience. Welcome, Shaun, and thank you so much for joining me today.
No, honestly, the pleasure is mine. It's so important with the position that I have to recognize just how important it is to speak on matters when it comes to mental health. And I think with everything that's been going on in my life and what's been going on in the world, there's no time more apt than now. So thank you so much for having me on the Happiful platform.
The pleasure is all ours. And we're going to take a step back for a minute and start by asking you to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a bit about you and what brought you to this podcast today.
So my name obviously is Shaun Flores. My heritage is Trinidad and Tobago. So we're from the land where carnival originated technically. So that's quite an interesting story. But for myself, I've done 2 TEDx talks. One was on the education system. The second one was about masculinity and the straitjacket of masculinity and mental health. So that's something that I'm really passionate about. I studied a degree, a master's in race, media and social justice. So it's quite important to me to understand how all these different things intersect in society. Something I try to speak quite a lot about is mental health. I grew up in a community where mental health is not something we readily talk about. It's not something that's readily available. My mum came in a time where they didn't really conceptualize what it meant to be perhaps anxious. It was certain culture, certain norms and customs that are kind of just trickled down into our society. My life has been recovering at the moment. So I was diagnosed with OCD in April earlier this year. Then I ended up in hospital with pneumonia. Then I tore my ACL, MCL, meniscus, and fractured my leg. So I'm recovering physically from that as well. I'm recovering mentally, physically, and emotionally. But in many ways, whilst OCD was the worst thing to ever happen to me, I often keep saying I'll be the worst thing to ever happen to OCD.
And thank you so much for being here in light of everything that is going on and sharing what's going on for you and talking about OCD. We really appreciate it. It's a big thing that you're doing. And you say you were diagnosed in April this year. It's not a long time to have that diagnosis. Can you start by sharing a bit about what it is in terms of your personal OCD? Because it will be different for everybody.
Yeah. So when I think it started was I woke up one time and I had a dream. And in this dream, I just saw the back of a guy and I saw colorful boxers. And I was 100% convinced as soon as I woke up that I was gay. I was so anxious. I was constantly looking for evidence. So that started off as sexual orientation, which is homosexual OCD, which I know is not, apparently it's really common, a lot more than people think. So then after that, it manifested into harm OCD. And the harm OCD was when I was with one of my friends, I'm going to be very open. So this is a trigger warning. A word popped into my head. It was a very intrusive word and it was just the word rape. And I had a massive panic attack. I was 100% convinced again that to have that word in my head meant I was going to do something. So I screamed at my friend. I begged her to leave because I was just so convinced I was going to do something. And what happened was I said, all right, I'm going to try and sleep. And when I tried to sleep, I saw slashing images and the thoughts of suicide popped into my head. I had another breakdown. The mental health team were called out. And I said, all right, I already know what I need to do, which is therapy. So I started to see a psychodynamic counselor. And for anybody that has OCD, that's those are probably the worst people you can see for what we have, because they keep you in the rabbit hole, they keep you in the loop, they keep you going over and chewing things over and over, which is essentially rumination. But then what happened was I was out with one of my friends and I was on the bus, and a thought popped into my head: fight the guy. And I can laugh about it now because it shows me how illogical my response was at the time. But I had a breakdown. I thought I was going to fight the guy. I was like, what's going on? I couldn't understand what was going on. I had that breakdown. A couple minutes later, I decided to just try and carry on with the day. So I went to a shop to eat some food. And when I was in the shop, the suicide thought hit. And I couldn't take it anymore. I ordered an Uber. I ran home. I called my friends and I told them I was depressed and I told them I was suicidal, because I believed the idea and the narrative that was happening in my mind. And I called up all my people that I had issues with. I genuinely believed in my head, in some capacity, I was being punished for everything that was going on. So I sorted out all those issues. But as the days went on, the thoughts wouldn't stop. My inner narrative wouldn't stop. And now I understood the inner narrative that was happening at the time was anxiety. Then one Saturday I woke up and again, it was too much. Believed I was reaching my breaking point. Thanks to the Instagram algorithm, I found my therapist by the name of Emma Garrick, otherwise known as the Anxiety Whisperer. And I was so distraught and so full of tears. And she listened to me and she explained to me what was happening. It was OCD. So therapy started on the Monday. And I just waited for time to chew me up. I didn't want to do anything. I was so severely depressed. Didn't want to shower, didn't want to eat. I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to be outside. Because I genuinely believed that to have the thoughts I had meant I was a horrible, bad person. But I had every thought you could imagine. And I lived from therapy session to therapy session. And as time went on, my therapist has given me the confidence and the belief to go out there and help people. And she genuinely believes, whilst OCD has happened to me, she genuinely believes I'm going to go on to help other people with OCD, which has led me to this point where I speak very openly and in a very raw manner about the story that I have, especially because of my community. Since I've written articles for people with OCD, about my journey with OCD, so many people from my community have reached out to me and said, I thought I was the only one. And I said, you're not the only one. And this shows that so I'm Caribbean, but also in the African community as well. One of my friends who's African, he also has OCD, and he doesn't talk about it because of the shame. I really want to continue spreading the message, raising awareness, getting more studies out there, and just doing more for my community, especially in regards to OCD. So that's why I said to you, one of the most exciting things I've got happening at the moment is the article that's coming out about religious OCD. I've got another piece hopefully coming out in the Metro, which is going to be really exciting. I'm going to hopefully be doing some speakers tours about OCD as well, because so many people suffer in silence. So many.
Again, there is so much in what you've just spoken about, and I can hear the passion and the purpose in your voice, and I can also hear the pain, Shaun. So I'm just going to check in that this is good and you can talk about this.
Oh, absolutely. It's good, because as much as I'm emotional, it's a healing thing for me, because the more I hold on to these things, it doesn't do any good for me. I want to share my story, because a story shared is a burden halved. And just because I'm in pain doesn't mean that I can't not share my story. So this is why I'm more than happy to be on this platform, just sharing this story. My life has been re-energized and repurposed with everything that's happened to me. I genuinely believed beforehand that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and now I know what I want to do. I really want to help other people with OCD. I want to be that, in many ways, a self-appointed spokesperson for the community. That's something really important to me.
That's wonderful. And when you shed light onto mental health and mental ill health, we dissipate shame. And that's one of the things that keeps us silent is the shame. And you touched upon those feelings of shame when you were having your intrusive thoughts, and what you were describing, perhaps people would know as pure O, which is a part of OCD. There are different types of OCD. I'm not a counsellor or a therapist, I have to say that, but there are the different types of OCD. And pure O is the type of OCD where you have a thought, but you don't carry out a compulsion to alleviate the anxiety. And I should say that would be a momentary alleviation of the anxiety. It doesn't take it away completely. So you were having those thoughts and you were either distancing yourself from the people around you before you got that support in order to minimize the chances of what you believed could happen when you had that thought. Now that you are aware of what OCD is, how are you managing on a day-to-day basis with that
So quite interestingly, I've laughed about it because one of my friends, when we used to go shopping every Saturday together. It was our time to spend, and I used to have these command intrusive thoughts, which was kiss him, kiss him. I was getting all of these different thoughts, and at the time, it used to stress me, but I didn't say anything about it. And now that I understand it's intrusive thoughts and it's OCD, I actually say to him, "Oh, bro, I just had a thought to kiss you," and we just laugh about it. We laugh about it all the time. We just have a lot of fun. But I think how I'm managing it now is anything OCD tells me not to do, I go and do it. I remember one time I was eating food and a thought popped into my head that I'm not sure if I can swear, but it was literally, "You're a fat bastard, you shouldn't eat." And I was just like, well, I'm just going to carry on eating. I'm going to get the nutrition that I need. Because obviously OCD it can be incredibly terrorizing, but obviously it's about how we respond. I still have certain thoughts, but from what I understand, and I'm reading a great book called Rewire, your OCD Brain, obviously the more that you continue to pay attention to the thoughts, is the stronger they get in your brain circuitry, right? So that's something I've really recognized. But how I also manage is I journal every day, so I practice gratitude, and that's really helped me, that mindfulness, to understand that whilst I may not always be perfectly okay, or I might be a bit anxious, that there's a lot of things in my day that I can be grateful for. And meditation has been fantastic for me as well, because it gives me that space between my thoughts, my mind, and what's actually happening in reality. That people forget that often our brains are just doing a job, and the brain has a job and it's telling us a story, and our mind believes that story. But once you start to practice like cognitive diffusion, where I often say this to people, if you go, "I am anxious," it's very different from going, "I feel anxious," because you recognize it's a feeling. It's not a permanent state of being. It's actually inspired me probably at some point to be a therapist, because I really can see how it is. But yeah, that's how I manage it at the moment. Another way I've actually been managing is just writing articles and sharing my story, because it just constantly allows me to practice brain dumping, where I'm getting things out of my head and I'm getting it out there. And in turn, that helps other people. So that's some of the ways I'm really managing.
And now you have awareness of what it is. You're
Yeah.
able to put in those coping mechanisms. And also you said you're seeing a therapist.
Yeah, my therapist, in many ways, I've said to her constantly, I said she saved my life, because I don't know where I would have been without her. I begged for the help from the NHS, but the NHS has been chronically overbooked, I think is maybe the word, or there's too long waiting queues. I remember I called out the NHS and I said, "I can't take it anymore. Like, I need help." And they recommended me a book. This one, Break Free from OCD, is one of the books. And since working, so now I do volunteering with Orchard OCD. So we're looking at funding faster treatment. I'm reading this book, Blue, and a book by Dr. Lynn Drummond, which is Everything You Need to Know About OCD. So I'm more than happy to, share a lot of the books that have been really helping me, because I think once you, as you said, once you understand what OCD is, it is an anxiety disorder. And I've often said that anxiety is not real, in the sense of it's our brain trying to protect us. That's the one thing I've really taken away from Rewire Your OCD Brain, but it's your brain trying to protect you. Once you learn to teach your brain that it's okay, I can have this thought and I can tolerate that anxiety, as time goes on, you rewire it. So that's that neuroplasticity, I think is the term that I remember.
I mean, it's great to hear you talking about it in this way after we've heard how it was when it was at its absolute worst. And
Yeah.
we know from a lot of the stories we hear about people with OCD and personal experience that it can dominate so much of your life on a daily basis. And actually, you've put in place a lot of the things that can help. And you've mentioned that the NHS, they are obviously overburdened at the moment, and that can be really problematic. So what we'll do in the show notes, we'll also add in charities and places people can go to where they can speak to someone for free if they're at any point in that journey and need signposting. Because I think when you get to that point, it can feel like you're very powerless, and we want to give you all the power we can. And I just wanted to backtrack on something you talked about earlier on, which was a friend of yours who said that they were living with OCD as well, but had never spoken about it. And you made the point that people from your community will not talk about mental health, especially men, maybe. Now, I don't want to paraphrase what you said. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and also your thoughts on how speaking out can help.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll take you back. So my friend, he's Congolese, and we met when I was at during my master's degree at Goldsmiths University, and so obviously he's gay. And when I was having all these sexual orientation thoughts, I couldn't understand why I was having these thoughts, but I didn't want to act on these thoughts, or I was considering, should I act on these thoughts? Is this something that I should do? So when I spoke to him and I said, oh, bro, like, I think I'm gay, right? He said, he said to me, this was his exact words, you're the straightest guy I know, you're not gay. So when I got diagnosed with OCD, the very first thing he said to me, he said, I believed you had OCD from the get-go. That's what straight away is exactly what he said to me. But in his community, so African community and my community, the Caribbean community, I think a lot of us don't talk about mental health because I think of the history where typically people with anything to do in regards to mental health is seen as abhorrent. It's that shame. But I think in some parts as well, there's a part of history we are now starting to discuss, which I think is colonization. And I think it's carried through certain views that have permeated our culture and have been imported regardless where you are in the world. So when I talked to my mum, when I sent my mum my article about OCD, my mum didn't even know what OCD was herself. And she is an actual nurse, but not a mental health nurse, to make it clear. But my mum, I believe, for example, has an undiagnosed anxiety disorder. My mum's behavior is quite irrational and a bit illogical at times. And she can't see it, but from me having the space now to understand mental health and having those tools and having the awareness, now I can see why. But for example, in the article I wrote about religious OCD and the idea, a lot of the things that people think are normal are probably actually not normal. It's just they've been adopted into the culture and they've become such a heavy part that you don't see them outside of the parameters. So people who are inside of it, they can't see it as not normal until they come outside. But I think there's a lot of factors. I think it's a multi-layered answer, but some of them I definitely think has to do with the history. A lot of it has to do with the shame, the guilt. And I think a lot of it is the idea that God, in some aspects, wouldn't do that to someone. So my friend and I, we were talking last night, and he made a great point. He said, OCD and the treatment for OCD proves when secular treatment triumphs over religious dogma. And I think that was a really key point, because if I had gone to the church and with my thoughts, I would have probably been told to pray more. I would have probably been told someone will pray for me, and I probably wouldn't have got the help. And if I had religious OCD, that would have obviously fanned the fuels to the compulsions and the flames. So I think in a very lucky way, I'm quite privileged that I've got a bit of a dissentful mentality towards religion, in the sense of I can criticize it and I can see myself outside of it. Whereas my mum, she's not really like that. I'm not trying to go off for too much, but yeah, I think that's how I would think about it.
And this is why people need to read your articles and your words about this. I'd just like to unpick a tiny bit of that, which is where you started, where you said to your friend, I think I might be gay. And he said he didn't think you were. And then it came back full circle to, I thought you had OCD. What do you think was the blocker to you having a conversation about mental health at that point? Was it that you both didn't think you'd be receptive to it, or there was such a stigma at that point before you'd had professional support?
I think anybody with OCD, we often feel like we're the only ones that are going through it because we're stuck with it in our mind and in our world. And I thought at the time, if I told him every single thought I was having, I probably would have been heavily judged. And it wouldn't be his fault. It's my anxiety around things. But when I did finally open up to him about everything that was going on, he said he really understood. But I think for myself, being a man speaking about mental health, at times you can feel weak. At times you can feel vulnerable, especially when some of the mentalities within the community are suck it up, deal with it, man up, handle it, do whatever you've got to do. And I've learned that as I've gotten older, that there's only so far you can run from pain, because pain will eventually chase you. And that's something I've really realized. But I think the blocks for myself, I think it's my ideas about culture. And the one thing I've honestly realized now more than ever is by me not caring about those walls that people put up within the culture and me speaking so openly, it started to dismantle so many of those walls right now. That's something I've really realized. When I've told my friends, look, I've got OCD. And they're like, oh, isn't that the cleaning thing? And I said, well, we still need to do a cleanup act on OCD then. And our narrative around it. it's massively helping. And then I went on a rabbit hole where I realized some of the most famous people in the world have OCD. Jessica Alba, Justin Timberlake, Donald Trump, Leonardo DiCaprio. There's so many people with OCD. George Ezra, countless people, but nobody from my community speaks up about OCD. So I think another block is that we don't have anybody in our community who speaks up massively about OCD. And typically the narrative is imported from America as well. So when I do think about people that have OCD that are black and speak about it, I can only think about one guy. His name is Duke Durham, I think it is, on Instagram. And in the US, I'm not sure what their names are. But yeah, we need to do more in the UK for black people with OCD. And just the BAME community in general, as much as I don't really like the term BAME, I think it's over-inclusive.
I mean, the fact that you could reel off a number of people who have OCD who are white, but it's hard for you to name somebody who's black who's talking in the media about OCD. That's just indicative, isn't it, of how far the conversation needs to go. And I thank you for having that conversation, and also for having the conversation amongst your peers, because that is so important. That's everything that we stand for, is just being able to speak to the people in your life and be open and honest. And that's where the work starts, isn't it? That's when you're at your most vulnerable. You're able to say to someone, this is what's happening right now. I'm having an intrusive thought, which is this, rather than having to get off the bus or tell your friend to leave you. And mental ill health in that way just isolates you further and further and further. Where are you today with everything that's going on?
So I think I'm in quite a good place. Obviously, I'm a little bit anxious about this conversation. I'm anxious about this conversation in the sense of excitement, because I know how far I've come. It's been April, but life has felt in many ways agonizingly slow. And I still take every day by day. I still do what I need to do to get better. And at the moment, I'm writing countless articles and I'm pitching them to every different newspaper and every different publication and magazine that I can, just to get the word out there. I'm going to be going to the OCD Game Changers event, which is actually really exciting. I'm going to be going there and trying to speak to the individuals there, and I want to try and actually tell them, look, we need someone to speak up for my community, and that's something I really want to put myself forward for. So that's something that's really going to be that's something else I'm going to be doing. I'm actually also planning to do another TEDx talk on OCD, and my aim to give that place, so I'm going to manifest this, is TEDx London, because TEDx London is a monumental and it's a huge stage. So I'm going to be going to the TEDx London event on the 2nd of October it is. I'm going to try and speak to them about delivering a TEDx talk on OCD, because whenever, again, we think about OCD, we think about America. Nobody in the UK really speaks about it. So that's something else I'm doing. So I think at the moment, I'm in a deep gratitude for life. There was a day a couple of weeks ago where I sat down and I cried out of gratitude and joy for being alive, because there were many times I did not want to be alive anymore. I remember when for 3 nights in a row, I called the Samaritan's helpline because I was going through the harm OCD, and I couldn't understand why I was having cut myself. I kept thinking, why can't I get this thought out of my head? Why won't this thought just leave? Why does it keep going around on a loop? Now I've just realized when a thought comes, it's going to go eventually. It's just a thought. And in the words of David Goggins, thoughts cannot hurt you. It's only the power you give to those thoughts. But that's easier said than done. It's something I've had to learn, as much as I've had help with therapy. I've also said to my therapist, you're my therapist, but I still need to go away and do the hard work for myself. That's something else that's been helping me alongside. But I actually also found out I have ADHD. So whilst I picked up papers to get something sorted for my knee, I looked through my medical records, and in the year 2000, it said ADHD. And as I looked through some documents in my house, I found more documents about ADHD. So my therapist actually believes the ADHD is actually helping me with OCD, because it's making me hyper fixated and hyper focused on something else. And again, ADHD has a negative connotation in the community. And that's because, unfortunately, a lot of young black boys are misdiagnosed and actually overdiagnosed with ADHD. So I'm not sure how much the label fits with me personally. I can see some overlaps between OCD and ADHD. So that's something else I'm actually working through. But there's so much I'm just grateful for, and there's so much I'm looking forward to. And since writing one of my articles, I'm not sure if I've shared this, a young man reached out to me and he said to me, I'm severely depressed. I'm 24. I can't do anything. I can't do this and I can't. There was so much he was telling me. And another lady reached out to me on LinkedIn after Dr. Lynn Drummond shared my article, my blog that I wrote with Orchard OCD, and we had a phone conversation. And it's just, I've had a new sense of community with people with OCD because I know what it is to sit in that dark place and to feel like there is no light. I know exactly what that feels like. To feel when you get on a train, you're having all these thoughts, you're paranoid, you're worried, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. I know that place. I know that sunken place better than anybody else. So I'm just grateful. Gratitude is the only word that I can describe how my life feels. And when I'm going through a hardship, when I'm going through certain moments where I'm like, I can't do this anymore, I remind myself that there's a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche that says, "He who has a why can endure any suffering." And I think that's something that's going through my life. And I actually no longer talk about myself in regards to suffering from OCD. I regard myself as in recovery from OCD because I think language is so powerful. Because when you say you are suffering with OCD, you don't realize the negativity that's putting on you. It's important to speak about yourself in regards to recovery, that you are moving into a place. It's not a destination, sorry. It's a journey. So that's something that I found has been really important for me.
I mean, words seem to be so important for you in terms of speaking, in terms of writing, in terms of having that connection with people. I have such respect for you being so honest at the point that it is so raw for you, Shaun.
It's just so important for me to be this raw because I think you need to give people the unadulterated truth. I truly believe to help others in this world, you have to be 100% honest and ready to share your story. I just want people to know that you are not alone. We are not alone. And people living with OCD and in recovery from OCD and those who feel they may have OCD or those who know the people with OCD, get clued up on it, become aware, become your own educator because you can get through it. That has been something that's so important. And one thing I've really realized, the people around me who also do have other mental health issues, and I don't use it as a pejorative, I use it as merely a descriptor for what's happening in their life. One thing I've really been inspired and motivated by is seeing some of the people in my life give up. It's so easy to give up, and it's very easy to give up in many ways, but it's harder to keep going. But every time you keep going, you're building a new resolve and you're teaching your brain you've got a different limit. You can keep going. You can keep going. Don't get me wrong. I still have my moments where I struggle, but I always remember there is light at the end of the tunnel, that it gets easier with time, and it has got easier with time. It's got so easy sometimes that I'm a bit like, where's the intrusive thoughts today? Like, come on, where are you at? Throw something at me. And as my therapist says to me, it's called a backdoor spike, where you're a bit like, all right, the thoughts are gone, but you're like, hold up, I've lived with you for so long, rent free in my head, come back. Like, we need to pay rent. You get so used to OCD being a tenant in your mind, you're a bit like, oh no, it feels empty without you. So another thing that I've learned that's been really helpful for me is to laugh at it and to make jokes about the OCD. And I know that's not easy for everyone to do because I've had every thought you could imagine. I've had some, and I'm not going to use the adjective disgusting, but I've had thoughts that, irrespective are good or bad, a thought is just a thought. And I've just had to learn to laugh at it. It builds a new sense of tolerance and a different sense of humor for you.
I want to talk to you a bit about, as we come to the end of the podcast, life outside of OCD, if it is possible to detach the two, because talking to you today, you are so passionate and so purposeful. Are you managing to look after yourself outside of that purpose? Because it can become all-encompassing, can't it, when you're in the middle of managing your mental health? What are you going to do for yourself after this podcast and giving so much of yourself to us?
So after what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and have another meal. I had a really nice breakfast and I've got therapy later on as well, which I'm really looking forward to. I always look forward to speaking to my therapist. She's a fantastic woman. And as I said, she's been an anchor in my storm. So that's something else I'm doing. That's another way I'm going to look after myself. But also, how I look after myself in a very strange way is I push myself as deep into the OCD rabbit hole as I can. And I keep pulling myself back out to keep showing myself we can talk about this and this means nothing anymore. These are just thoughts. But another thing that I'm going to do is probably decompress for a little bit. So I'm going to go and watch some series, which is always good for me. It helps me to relax, helps me to take my mind off things. Then I need to actually write up a GoFundMe. So for anybody who wants to donate towards my knee surgery, that would be greatly appreciated. I got to be a little bit of a shameless plug because unfortunately ACL surgery is so expensive. And again, with the NHS, the waiting list is a year, but then recovery from an ACL tear is another year. So yeah, that's also what I'm going to do. But life beyond OCD. What does life beyond OCD mean for me? You're right. I'm deeply immersed in the OCD rabbit hole at the moment. But what I really want to do, I think beyond all of that, is to travel. So I'm actually quite afraid at times to travel by myself. So I want to start conquering all my fears. The one thing I've learned with OCD is OCD has thrown my worst fears at me. So why don't I go and put myself with my worst fears? That's the best thing that I can do. And I'll give you an example. So myself and the team at one of the organizations I work with, I don't want to give it away. We're looking at building, developing a film about OCD. We're going to be talking about all the different types of OCD, and I've put myself forward as the main actor because that's going to be an exposure for me in the sense of I'm going to have to deal with what's uncomfortable. It's going to be a lot, but I'm actually prepared to do that to show my brain we have nothing to worry about. And I'm putting myself front line and center. So that's another thing. What else do I really want to do? I want to continue doing my modeling, continue doing the influencing, but making sure I have the right influence, continue the public speaking, and just change the community that I'm from for the better. That's the thing that I think is really important to me. And whether that's down OCD or whatever it might be, I've still got to figure it out, but I'm trying to live with the uncertainty in that sense. And that's just something else you've got to live with when you've got an anxiety disorder. You've got to learn to accept uncertainty. Through accepting uncertainty, you realize there's so much you can treasure in your day-to-day moments. So another tip that I've learned is whenever I catch myself overthinking, I go, Shaun, you're overthinking, pull yourself back to the present. And the more I've practiced that is the easier it has become as time goes on. Because people forget that the neurons that wire together fire together. So when you cut the cord of overthinking and not being in the present, and you keep rewiring it to push you back into the present, you change your brain chemistry. And I know at times it may feel like nothing is changing, but it does change. When I caught myself crying out of gratitude, I never thought that would happen in my entire life. I've been the kind of person who has just let things happen. I go through it. I don't care about it. I'm like, what's next? What's next? Rather than going, Shaun, you did something really good there. Give yourself some credit. So that's another way I've been looking after myself. Gratitude has really taught me it's taught me everything now at the moment. And just also, again, being on this podcast, it's another way for me to look after myself because I'm sharing my story that I know is going to help so many people out there.
It really will. And I have such gratitude for you being on today. And I'm very glad that you have some outlets for the rest of the day to really look after yourself and take that time out, because that is just as important, when you're doing that work on yourself, is that you take that time to step back and really kind of recharge, and that you're seeing your therapist later as well, which is wonderful. Shaun, any final words for anyone listening to this, perhaps someone who, like you, a year ago didn't really know what was going on? What would you say to them?
I think the first thing I would say is understand you're not a bad person. Because one of my very first thoughts when I spoke to my therapist for the very first time was, I said, am I a bad person having all these thoughts? Why am I having these thoughts? Am I being punished? You're not a bad person. It's an anxiety disorder. It's anxiety on steroids. That's the best way for me to describe OCD at times. You are not a bad person. There's just something slightly a bit off with our brain chemistry. That's all it is, and it can change. That I reiterate, you are not alone. We are not alone. We are a community, and there's so many people out there that live with OCD, that have recovered from OCD. And also, a relapse doesn't mean that you're going to go back to square one, because that's something else I've realized. When I had relapses, and a relapse looks like where you're reacting to the thoughts or you're allowing the thoughts to get to you, that it doesn't mean I'm going back to square one. I can get through this. I've been there before, and I can keep picking myself up. So that's something else that I've realized. But also, make sure you have people around you who want to understand OCD, who want to help you with OCD. So get clued up, see people who really want to help you get better. Have a community around you that will help build you up. That's been so important to me, incredibly important. I can't begin to tell you the magnitude. And just don't give up on yourself. It's very easy to give up on yourself. It's very easy to not see that you're going to get better. but you can get better.
We're deeply grateful that you came on today. And I look forward to watching you at TEDx London, because I know it will happen. If people want to find out more about you, including your GoFundMe for your ACL surgery, where can they find you online?
So everything is Shaun Flores. So TheShaunFlores. Pretty much everything. You can find me on TikTok. I've just joined TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well, LinkedIn. I'm pretty much the same everywhere. So yeah.
Marvelous. And that will all be in the show notes as well. Shaun, thank you. Thank you for listening to I Am, I Have. Don't forget to head across to happiful.com for more great mental health and wellbeing conversations. And if you're looking for mental health support, you'll find more information on our site, including links to counselling directory. If you need immediate help, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you do not have to be in crisis to receive their support. Help is always available. I'm Lucy Donoghue, the producer and host of this podcast. I hope you'll listen again soon.